Good morning, kids. I hope that everyone is having a wonderful Friday. Let me tell you what you're going to do today. You're going to do an On This Day with me in just a second. If you haven't yet, let's make sure you guys have your Chapter 27 ISN out in front of you, because I'm going to do the preview, excuse me, with you. During my little lesson about Athens and Sparta. So then we'll do a little lesson about Athens and Sparta. And then remember, I told you the other day, you're going to either choose to be a part of Athens or be a part of Sparta. And based on your decision of which city-state you would like to be a part of, you are going to complete, excuse me, the ISN for that. For only the sections for Athens or only the sections for Sparta. So we'll talk more about that at the end. But let's do On This Day. Okay, so on this day in history, Lewis and Clark depart in 1804. Raise your hand without blurting if you've heard Lewis and Clark. It's the name of a college in Oregon. Fun facts with Miss Seaman. So the Lewis and Clark expedition left St. Louis, Missouri on a mission to explore the Northwest. So that's places like Washington and Oregon. So 1 year after the U.S. doubled its size from the Louisiana Purchase, Thomas Jefferson commissioned Lewis and Clark to lead an expedition before the negotiations concluded. He wanted to know what else was out in the world, okay? So they left with 45 men and only 33 would make the whole trip. It's an okay ratio, I guess. They traveled up the Missouri River in a 50-foot long keelboat and 2 smaller boats. On November 8th, 1805, they arrived at the Pacific Ocean, and they were the first European explorers to accomplish the overland travel, kind of from one part of what's the North America, United States, to the Pacific Ocean. So that was a really big deal at this time. In November, they were joined by a French-Canadian fur trader and his wife, Sacagawea or Sacagawea, who knows how to say it. She was an interpreter for them with different Native American tribes. They wintered in present-day North Dakota before crossing Montana, where they first saw the Rocky Mountains. Listen, my dad used to work in North Dakota, and then him and my sister both for a time lived in Montana. And let me tell you what, those winters sound quite terrible. So let's be, I guess, I don't know, maybe some of you like the winter time a lot, like snowy. But I'm kind of glad we don't live in a place like that. And then on the other side of the continental divide, they got horses from the Shoshone, and they were able to make the rest of their trip out. It was a success, and they're definitely a group of people we still talk about today. I don't know, do you learn about them in like 5th grade history? I don't know. Maybe in 8th grade you'll learn about them. Who knows? But that's your On This Day today. All right, so life in the city-states, Athens versus Sparta. So remember, you just turned in your maps on Wednesday, so you should kind of be familiar with this area of Greece, right? We know Athens is on the coast and Sparta is a little bit more inland, but close enough. And they were looking at these 2 city-states because the life in these 2 different city-states was different from one another, okay? So now I need you to look at your ISN, okay? Chapter 27. So our key question says, what were the major differences between Athens and Sparta? But we're looking at the preview. It says, examine the 2 illustrations of ancient Greek city-states your teacher will show you, then answer the questions below. So I had this, it says top image and bottom image. This is the top image, okay? So take a look for a second. Why don't you, in your groups, take a minute to talk about what you see, and you can pause me for a second, and then when you're ready, move on again. Okay, so Now this is the second image, and I want you to do the same thing. In your groups, talk about what you see, and then pause me again if you need to take a second, all right? Okay, so going back to image number one. Number one, on your ISN, the preview says, describe the geography of the city-state in the top image. That's what you're looking at now, okay? Do you think that city-state has a farming or trading community? So you need to pause for a second and make sure you answer this question. So you can pause me again too. Answering this question shouldn't take you too long. Some of you are already writing and ignoring me. That's totally fine in this instant. So make sure you get that started, please. And okay, now we're looking at Sparta. Oh, I told you which is which, sorry. So now you're looking at the second one and says describe the geography of this city-state. Do you think that this city-state was a farming or a trading community? So again, you need to answer this question. Remember, you already talked about the images with your groups, so go ahead and make your prediction or answer the question. Okay, so the third question says, using the details in the illustration to help you, try to predict what other differences might have existed between these two city-states. So go ahead and answer that last question. Again, pause me and take a minute to do so. And then we'll move right on to the next part. Okay, so today, city-states. Just a reminder, what's a city-state? Well, a city-state is a city and surrounding region that is also an independent nation with its own army, currency, laws, and elected leaders. You already know this because if I asked you this right now and I was in class, you would tell me that Mesopotamia was also a place that had city-states. And you remember that city-states have their own king or governing officials. We just talked about forms of government, so when we look at Athens and Sparta today, you'll learn that even in these two city-states, they practiced two different kinds of government. So here are their locations. You can see that Sparta, Athens, right? You can also look at the map and see where a bunch of other city-states are, but we're just talking about Sparta and Athens, okay? Why? Well, because they contrast each other well, and that's what we want to see. We want to see two different lifestyles. So let's watch this video of a day in the life of an ancient Athenian, so someone from Athens.
It's 427 BCE, and the worst internal conflict ever to occur in the ancient Greek world is in its fourth year. The Peloponnesian War.
Sorry, kids. I'm going to stop my webcam so you don't have to look at me down in the corner the whole time.
Is being fought between the city-states of Athens and Sparta, as well as their allies. The Athenians can't match the formidable Spartan army on land, so they've abandoned the countryside and moved inside the walls surrounding their city and port, now provisioned by a superior fleet and extensive maritime empire. The cramped conditions have taken a toll, and a recent plague wiped out a third of the population, but city life goes on. Archias and Dexaleia live in the center of Athens. As a painter of high-class pottery, Archias is relatively well off and takes great interest in the city's affairs. Dexaleia, on the other hand, can't participate in politics or own property. The couple are grateful to the gods that 3 of their 4 children, a son and 2 daughters, have survived past infancy. Many parents see daughters as a liability since they require dowries to find husbands, but Archias is confident that his wealth will allow him to make good matches for them without going bankrupt. Like many Athenians, the family owns slaves. Originally from Thrace, they were captured in war. Thrata does most of the housework and helps raise the children. Philon is a pedagogos who supervises the son's education, teaching him reading and writing. Archias is up early because there's a meeting of the ecclesia, the assembly of citizens, taking place at dawn. Before setting out, he burns incense and pours a libation at the small shrine in the courtyard on behalf of his entire household. Dexalea will remain at home all day, teaching her daughters domestic skills. Later, she'll retire to the inner courtyard for some fresh air. When Archias arrives at the Agora, the civic and commercial heart of the city, he finds the square swarming with his fellow citizens, native-born adult males who have completed military training. Attached to the central monument is a notice board with the meeting's agenda. Today, there's only one item of discussion: what to do with the people of Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos, where a revolt against Athenian rule has just been put down. The meeting takes place on a hill west of the Acropolis, known as the Pnyx. The word means tightly packed, and the crowd of 5,000 citizens makes it clear why. The heralds purify the hill by sprinkling its boundary with pig's blood and call for order. As everyone sits on benches facing the platform, the presiding officer opens the meeting with the words, "Tis agoreben boulete," who wishes to address the assembly. One by one, citizens speak, some advising mercy, others bent on vengeance. A motion is proposed to execute all the Mytileneans and enslave their women and children because they betrayed their Athenian allies during a time of war. A majority raises their right hands in favor. Once the meeting's over, Archias heads back to the Agora to buy food and wine. Hundreds have gathered there to discuss the results, many unhappy with the decision. When Archias returns home, he tells Dexalea about the debate. She thinks that killing the innocent as well as the guilty is harsh and counterproductive, and tells him as much. Around dusk, Archias goes to a friend's house for a symposium. The 9 men drink wine and discuss the meeting well into the night. Archias shares his wife's opinion, urging mercy, and his friends eventually agree. Before dawn, something unprecedented happens. Heralds circulate throughout Athens, announcing the council has called another meeting. The second debate is equally heated, but a new resolution to execute only the leaders of the revolt narrowly passes. Yet there's a problem. A ship with orders to carry out the first resolution was dispatched the previous day. And so another ship quickly set sail to countermand the order, a race of democracy against time. Did you enjoy this glimpse of daily life in an ancient civilization? If so, check out our Day in the Life playlist. You can also help.
Okay, so let's talk about Athens first, since that is what you just saw, a day in the life of an Athenian. So government in Athens was ruled by a direct democracy. So Athenians were the first to do this. So if you remember from Wednesday what a direct democracy is, it showed a pretty good job of that in the video, but it's power to the people, man. But you have to know what people, okay? It's men, right? Ladies, not us, unfortunately. All right, moving on. So they had the Council of 500, which is a group of 500 citizens who was chosen to form a council responsible for the day-to-day business of government. The citizens, men, all belong to the assembly. They met weekly to discuss problems or issues and to come up with solutions. So, yes, this is what a direct democracy really does look like. Their military, they had an extremely strong navy. They were located near the Aegean Sea, and that when you're located next to the sea, you better have a good navy, right? You want to be able to defend your place. One of the greatest naval countries in the entire world is the United Kingdom, right? England. They've never been invaded since the time of William the Conqueror. We'll talk about him next year. But they've never, because their their navy is so strong. And then in Athens, at the age of 18, all boys received 1 to 2 years of military training. We don't do that in the United States, but there are other countries around the world where you have to serve in the military. One place that's like that is Israel. Their social structure. So sorry, my face is in the way. Sorry. So citizens and freemen had full citizenship rights, and they were divided into subclasses based on their wealth. So you can see that the citizens are at the top of the social pyramid. Medics were men that were not born in Athens, and they were not allowed to own land but could run businesses. And then slaves. A third of the population was slaves. They had no rights or freedom, and they were owned by their masters until death. The helots are slaves down here. So women in Athens, they were expected to be good wives and mothers, and they were not valued or respected. You could you could see the difference between a female and a male's role in that video where the men really control a lot of the things and the women are responsible for what's happening at their homes. They had little freedom. They did not formally attend school. They rarely left their home, and they were responsible for weaving and other domestic arts, which was showed in the video that I showed you guys. Education. Girls did not receive a formal education in Athens. However, boys started school at the age of 7, and they were educated in reading, writing, mathematics, gymnastics, poetry, and public speaking. So kind of cool and random subjects, right? Like gymnastics. Hey guys, we're going out to learn cartwheels and handsprings today. Poetry is really cool. Public speaking, right? You had to be comfortable speaking in front of a crowd, especially if you were going to be on the council. You couldn't not be comfortable talking in front of your peers. Lifestyle and values in Athens. They were a very creative city-state with lots of opportunity for males. They valued theater, art, philosophy, and science, and they believed in the good life, a life of wealth and luxury. Sparta. This is from the movie 300. Remember, I don't suggest movies, I just talk about them because 300 is gnarly. But ready to roll. So let's watch about Sparta.
In ancient Greece, violent internal conflict between border neighbors and war with foreign invaders was a way of life, and Greeks were considered premier warriors. Most Greek city-states surrounded themselves with massive defensive walls for added protection. Sparta, in its prime, was a different story, finding walls unnecessary when it had an army of the most feared warriors in the ancient world. So what was Sparta doing differently than everyone else to produce such fierce soldiers? To answer that question, we turn to the written accounts of that time. There are no surviving written accounts from Spartans themselves, as it was forbidden for Spartans to keep records. So we have to rely on those of non-Spartan ancient historians, like Herodotus, Thucydides, and Plutarch. These stories may be embellished and depict Sparta at the apex of its power, so take them with a grain of salt. For Spartans, the purpose for their existence was simple: to serve Sparta. On the day of their birth, elder Spartan leaders examined every newborn. The strong, healthy babies were considered capable of fulfilling this purpose, and the others may have been left on Mount Taygetus to die. Every Spartan, boy or girl, was expected to be physically strong, mentally sharp, and emotionally resilient, and it was their absolute duty to defend and promote Sparta at all costs. So in the first years of their lives, children were raised to understand that their loyalty belonged first to Sparta and then to family. This mindset probably made it easier for the Spartan boys, who upon turning 7 were sent to the Agonium, a place with one main purpose: to turn a boy into a Spartan warrior through 13 years of relentless, harsh, and often brutal training. The Spartans prized physical perfection above all else, and so the students spent a great deal of their time learning how to fight. To ensure resilience in battle, boys were encouraged to fight among themselves, and bullying, unlike today, was acceptable. In order to better prepare the boys for the conditions of war, the boys were poorly fed, sometimes even going days without eating. They also were given little in the way of clothing, so that they could learn to deal with different temperatures. Spartan boys were encouraged to steal in order to survive, but if they were caught, they would be disciplined, not because they stole, but because they were caught in the act. During the annual contest of endurance in a religious ritual known as the Diamastigosis, teenage boys were whipped in front of an altar at the sanctuary of Artemis Orthia. It was common for boys to die on the altar of the goddess. Fortunately, not everything was as brutal as that. Young Spartans were also taught how to read, write, and dance, which taught them graceful control of their movements and helped them in combat. While the responsibilities for the girls of Sparta were different, the high standards of excellence and expectation to serve Sparta with their lives remained the same. Spartan girls lived at home with their mothers as they attended school. Their curriculum included the arts, music, dance, reading, and writing. And to stay in peak physical condition, they learned a variety of sports, such as discus, javelin, and horseback riding. In Sparta, it was believed that only strong and capable women could bear children that would one day become strong and capable warriors. To all Spartans, men and women, perhaps the most important lesson from Spartan school was allegiance to Sparta. To die for their city-state was seen as the completion of one's duty to Sparta. Upon their death, only men who died in battle and women who died in childbirth were given tombstones. In the eyes of their countrymen, both died so that Sparta could live.
Okay, so quite the contrast between these two city-states. So government in Sparta, the city of Sparta was strictly ruled by 2 kings and a council of elders. There was very little input from the citizens, and they were focused strongly on the military, which you gathered from that video. The Spartan military was a force to be reckoned with. They valued their military above all else. Children were raised to become strong warriors for Sparta's military. All male citizens entered the army at age 20 and served until they were 60. So very military driven, military oriented. Social structure in Sparta. Okay. So the Spartiates, Spartan men, warriors, professional citizens, they had full citizenship and rights. Excuse me. Outsiders, so foreigners, people outside of Sparta, they were considered to be free men, but could not vote or serve in the army. And then lastly, the slaves, the helots, they were individuals who fought Sparta and lost, and they were treated like slaves, and they had no rights. Women in Sparta. So women in Sparta actually had quite a lot of freedom. They were allowed to control and own property. They were highly valued for the role in raising future Spartan warriors. Girls were not allowed to fight, but they still took part in the training because, this is the idea that a fit mother will equal fit babies, which equals strong Spartan soldiers. So they all, this picture is a great example. She's like, hey, honey, welcome home from your fight. Look I'm raising you strong, healthy children. And the part about them leaving children who they thought to be weak upon birth, they did that. Let's not pretend that is, we're not sugarcoating things. That happened. So education in Sparta, they valued physical strength above all else. Boys started at age 7 and lived in barracks or military housing. They were taught discipline, duty, strength, and military skill. Girls also went to school and were trained to fight, but they did not live in the barracks. They lived a simple life. They valued obedience and a powerful army. And then Spartans were not picky about their children, so they could marry who they wanted. So that's the gist, Athenians versus Spartans. You are going to choose which you are going to be. Now, this is something that has been said. It has been said it would have been ideal to have been a man in Athens and a woman in Sparta. Okay, what does that mean? Women in Athens, they only served in the army for 2 years. They got to vote. They had an active role in the government. Women in Sparta were valued. They were mothers who were expected to raise strong children, but also be strong themselves. So that's an interesting comparison. So you're not going to answer this, but the idea is you're going to choose if you want to be Athenian or Spartan. What does that look like? Well, it doesn't matter to me what you choose. Let's see. Okay, so let's look at, here's the text, okay? Oh, sorry, I want to actually look at, this is the ISN. You've already done the preview, correct? So, everyone's going to do section 2. Everyone has to do 27.2 because it's about the geography of the two city-states, okay? Do what it asks you to do. So it says if your class is doing the activity for this chapter, follow directions 1 through 3 to complete the reading notes. We're not doing the class activity, so you won't have to do this part that says answer to challenge question, okay? You will just answer the questions, why is Athens called a democracy, or why was Sparta called an oligarchy? 2 kings, remember? So I want you to take a second and choose, are you going to do Athens or are you going to do Sparta? Ready, go. Okay, so if you chose to do Athens, so everyone who's doing Athens, I just looked like I'm looking at you guys in class. If you chose to do Athens, you're listening to me right now. Spartans, shh, just sit there quietly for a second. Athenians, okay? You are going to be responsible for section 3, section 4, section 5, and section 6. Remember, you are not answering where it says answer to challenge question. All right, Athenians. Spartans, hello and welcome. As they like to say, this is Sparta. Spartans, you are doing section 7, 8, 9, and 10. You will also not answer the challenge question. You will not know how to. I mean, you're going to come to me on Monday and say, Seaman, I don't know what to do. Okay, stop it. All right, so you have the rest of the class period to work on your ISN. I want your sections done by the time I see you on Tuesday. And remember, on Tuesday, you're going to start creating a travel brochure to entice people to come to your city-state. So you need to be thinking about what are some things that you could put on this travel brochure to say, hey, come visit us. All right, have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. And I will see some of you on Monday and all of you on Tuesday.